Hi, welcome to the Andrew Buckle book review of Comics Unlimited, My Life as a Comic Collector and Dealer by Alan Austin. And what a gem this is. This is just a joy to read from start to finish. Now, Alan Austin was the first full-time comic dealer in the UK. I must admit, I don't think I ever visited his shop or bought any comics from him. Though I did get his Fancy Unlimited and Comic Unlimited occasionally. But I did get his index. Got a copy here. However, I never got the DC one, and I have looked. It doesn't say, I don't know if DC Comics Index is easily found. I haven't found a copy yet. However, goes on about 1960s, 1970s, all the early years of fandom, comic collecting. So it's everything about the UK. So there, Austin, 1955 to 2017. So let's just go through the book. There's 150 pages. So black and white all the way through. There's no pictures, unfortunately. Would have been really nice if there had been some pictures of some of the shops, but no pictures. Also, it would be nice pictures of Dark They Were and Golden Eyed and Forbidden Planet. Sadly, very few. I don't know why. Didn't people take photos of the shops? I've got a few, but that's not many. They're always sort of blurry pictures that were very badly done. However, you've got here, you've got the contents. So you've got Comic Collector and Dealer, My Fanzines, My Price Guide, My Comic Favourite Comics, America and Me, and Why Collect Comics, and all that sort of thing. So it covers a whole range of different comic marts, etc. I loved going to all the comic marts, Westminster Hall, all that sort of, also going to Dark They Were and Golden Eyed, but I never went to his shop. That's one regret. I wish I'd popped up, but I just didn't go. I went to the centre of town, generally never went out on the edges until when I went off to university, and then I would explore, but obviously by that time it changed. So, but My Life in Comics, and I love the fact he mentions here Bimbo. I've had copies of Bimbo over the years, and also probably when I was young I probably bought Bimbo. I don't recall. My first comics I remember were TV comic. I love TV comic, Beano and Dandy. Recently I got some Beanos and Dandies. It's really nice just to look and think, I remember those from 1964, 65, etc. These ones as well, War Picture Library, Battle Picture Library. Also mentions, of course, TV 21. I love TV 21 as well. Lion and Valiant. And there's a whole range here. He talks about, and a nice cover, Fantastic Four comic annual number 3. Oh, I love that one. The wedding issue, just a joy to read. The Wedding of Sue and Reed Richards, what a classic. Also mentions like Spider-Man number 3. He obviously mentions his friend who probably for a shilling, 5 pence. Wow, just get it for that. But of course, 5 pence was a lot. That was, well, easily my pocket money. I would never have been able to afford 5 pence. And all these sort of things, legions of superheroes. I remember we had shops in my local town, Maidstone, and we just piles of old DC ones, not really old Marvel ones. So it's only when I went up to London, like Dark They Were and Golden Eyed, and obviously later Forbidden Planet, just to find old copies. And also comic marts, of course. Comic marts were always great. I loved comic marts. And maybe he was there at comic marts. I probably bought stuff off his table. I don't know. However, it's got a load description all about the early years, obviously 1960s, etc. All about L. Miller and Co. Remember all those? I love those ones. Alan Class books. And also, of course, the good old the second-hand exchange shops where they crunched picture. They normally put a big stamp over the cover and 3 pence 3D or something. 3 pennies or something. And you think, wreck the thing. But however, it was a great way of picking up some real tatty issues. And also bookstalls and things. And you have these in markets. I remember picking up piles of. They were everywhere for next night. Of course, they'd been in the rain for most times. They were really damp and horrible. And also here, there were no popular book centres in East End. But once I discovered the source of old comics, of course, I mean, it was the same with me. Just finding old shops that sort of had always a pile of them. Of course, the person would never have just a load of comics, and you'd maybe get a roll of them at a fair or so, go to a fete. I love those. I come home with about 5,000 of them. And here he's talking about obviously reenacting Monty Python. Now, I was never a fan of Monty Python. One of my mates is mega fan of Monty Python. Always comes out with all the knows every single line. So I've watched them since, but I have to say. And he also talks about here Fancy Advertiser, Heroes Unlimited, and he's talking about Millwall, and also Golden Age DC, Timely Comics, etc., and all the old comics. I've got a few, not as many as I would like, but. And he obviously talks about this, like Fantastic Four number 1, which unlike the vast majority of my collection was a US copy with a 10 cents price on it. Yeah, those sort of things. Though I've never had a problem with whether it's in pence or pounds, but obviously, or pennies, old pennies. got to be terrible if it was in pounds. That would have been weird, wouldn't it? Fantastic Four #1. However, you've got here East Dulwich. I love East Dulwich. Very nice. And he's talking about all the various... So there's a load of things, all the shops. Many of course, I never went... Batmania. I remember that Batmania magazine that you got here. McDonald's. He even mentions things like McDonald's here. In the country, opened 1974. South London. And Weird Tales. I love those as well. Talks about Weird Tales. Being bundles of Weird Tales. Huge lot coming from legendary US collector Forrest Ackerman. And so on and so on. It's just page after page. And it's just here talking about a whole range of different shops, different places, all this obviously relationships, friends, etc. Also fantasy publishing, fanzine publishing, here fantasy advertiser, some of them I can't remember, comic catalogue, Eureka, I remember Eureka, published by Des Skin, Ace Advertiser, Silver Street, obviously a lot of advertisers. Those ones I must admit, I never bought anything off those. I lie, I think I did buy a few occasions. I was always a bit wary about sending money off to those things you'd send. No. Well, you would send a postal order or something like that. But no, I just always thought that would never come back, so you'd never see it again. So that was that. However, I love this one. He talks about a cassette costing £1. That was quite a bit actually. But I suppose back then I had to borrow 10 shillings from a friend. He says, just great, just all those sort of. And then he's talking about Superman, obviously 1930s. Also about the dealers, what the grading. I'm hopeless when it comes to grading. I must admit, most of my comics are in pristine condition. I mean, they are really, I look after my comics too. I try to anyway. Occasionally you're going to damage something. But I've always tried to look after them. But it's just, but then I always put them on as just good or very good, maybe. Because I've never been one for saying, well, it's not really near mint, even if it's probably near enough. I've gone to comic collection at markets and you look at stuff and it says near mint and you think, don't think so. Not really. I don't recommend. If it was near mint, it would be like it was near enough back in the day. It's not. But, however, I expect people will argue, what's the name on there? It's like slabs. He goes on about slabs in here as well. My favourite comics as well he's got here. And he talks about some of my actual favourites ones as well. He talks about the Fantastic Four ones. The period with the Frightful Four. I love that one. That was just a classic. And this, one of the ones I regret getting rid of. I regret that to this day. I don't know why it possessed me. I don't know where I put it. I think I just dumped it. Awful. But we were moving house and I just, it was 3 issues. I'm quite certain 3 volumes of this, and it was an index. Yeah, so it's here, 3-volume index to Timely Comics. And it was a labour of love. It was just one of the, and he mentions it here, Mike Hill, and one of the most amazing fan projects in fan history. I hope I didn't throw it away. I'm quite certain I didn't. I must have given it to the dealer in Reading. There was a guy in Reading. I think I probably took into that. Probably didn't get anything for it, but it's still, what a book. It was just so full of information. It was just a joy to read all the time. And then just one of my periods where I thought, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. Well, however, you got here Fantastic Four #1, of course, all the Flash and all that. And that was another thing back, like I said, back in the day. DC Comics, I saw more old DC Comics in Maidstone. There was loads, piles of them. So he talks about all this. Also Action Comics 1 and 2, all the various back for sale. So you've got Action Comics 1 and 2, Detective Comics, all the sort of regular ones. And you think, of course, at that time, I remember reading one recently, Comics Unlimited, Fancy Unlimited. It was 10 pence for Hulk #1. I mean, it said terrible condition. I expect it was terrible condition, but 10 pence. I would have bought it for 10 pence. Even if it was just one page, 10 pence. Yeah, I'll have it. It's just, no, probably at the time I wouldn't. 10 pence was a lot. And it's also talking about British comics. Yeah, talks about British comics, pulp magazines. So it's, also this one, Delighted, 1970s, James Steranko, talking about Steranko history comics. I love that book. So you've got just page after page, new comics. He's a bit sort of what's known about the new comics. But I've seen there are lots and lots of gems. I love getting new comics even now. I will go and buy new comics. But not always. I find that new comics, personally, always a bit too dark for my taste. I prefer lighter comics. So I quite often, if I buy a comic, it has to be sort of more saturated colours. I just prefer that. 1960s style comics. Just me. However, I can see old paper really, old comic book paper really gets cooked in American cities with it. And that is the thing, I guess. I said mine, I think fairly decent. I mean, I don't read them all the time. And quite often I've read, obviously, reprints. I've got lots of the reprints, Epic collection, so I'd prefer just to pick up the Epic. And because the thing is with Epics, you've got them in order. So if you got, and also quite often I look for my comics and I'm going, well, where is it? And I might go through thousands, not thousands, but quite a lot. And you're just looking for them and you think, where is it? I've never got them in order. Should have them in order, of course, but I haven't. And this also talking about why collect comics. I don't know, it's like collecting books. I love collecting books as well. I never think of them as collecting. It was just, you just accumulate, just accumulation, hoarding, terrible name. So occasionally, that's why I occasionally get rid of stuff. I think, I don't really want to hoard vast amounts. And he talks here about Fantastic Four, number 3, late 1950s, 1960s, DC letter columns, and nitpicking fans trying to, unintentional. Yes, occasionally, but I would never write in. The idea of actually, it says here, one curious aspect of collecting I've noticed is relatively few comic fans admit to actually reading old comics. I'm always sceptical as well with people. Quite often I go to comic marts and I listen to people talking about it, and I'm thinking, do they actually read them? Because I mean, I will read them, just go over it, and it's like I say, mainly reprints now, omnibus editions or something, but reading them. I love reading books and I love reading comics, I love reading magazines. But often it's just like, the cover. See, I've been standing by people and they've actually said, I'm not interested in reading the book. What? That's unbelievable. I mean, I would at least read a couple of the articles because quite often, like a pulp magazine, some of the stories are awful. Really, truly awful. However, they do have an energy and so it's just great that, talks about reading, collecting, passion or disease. Well, probably, I don't know. Everyone has their own take on it. I mean, why not? I think it's a great, comic collecting is just a joy to read. It's unfortunately, lots of these comics become, because of the films or whatever, priced insane prices. And I just don't, I remember Marvel Superheroes, first one, The Guardians of the Galaxy. You could get that for 5 pence. And I sold it, bought it, sold it, bought it, sold it, bought it for 5 pence, 10 pence for ages. Now it goes for insane amounts of money. So, doesn't make any sense. Because the story hasn't changed. It's just, and it's not even the same characters. That's even more daft. But however, but it talks about all these sort of things about the hobbies and acquiring comics, and all talking about here timely comics. Unfortunately, I've never had it. I've had a few timely comics, but never the big ones. So it talks about obviously the real timely comics, the Captain Americas, Human Torch, all winners, all those sort of things. But I've always had sort of the real sort of non sort of ones, but looking after them, it's talking about comic bags as well. So there's just lots of, I've got quite a few of my comics in comic bags, but I've never really, most of my comics are not. Because trouble is you put them in the comic bag and quite often you end up probably damaging the comic more often, unless you get real massively wide comic things. It's just, so I prefer sometimes just to keep them out, because I end up scrunching them when I put them in. And I hate it when I get the things and it's always got a bit of tape. Why do they put the tape there? Because what happens, and I probably mentioned, I'm watching a documentary and someone mentions about the tape. Tape is one of the most annoying things. It always gravitates towards the comic. Virtually inevitable, middle of the comic or something. So it just tears it. You think, oh no! It always goes to that. However, you've got here restoration comic marts. And you've got here this one's about the Xmas market. And also, I never went there. Camden Town, Lyndhurst Hall. This one, Holborn Assembly Hall, remember there, Royal Horticultural Hall, Old Hall, Central Hall, Westminster. I love those. Also, maybe it was the same place. TUC one. I remember going to TUC one as well. Fantastic Four number 1, early 1970s, around 30 quid. That would have been insane. And this one on top was a copy of Detective Comics number 27. And let's just, I'm not going to say all, because get this book. This book is to invest or not. Each their own. I have no anyone. I always see comic, as far as I'm concerned, the tatty of the comic. Okay, I'm okay. I'm okay with coverless comics. I'm okay with tatty comics that are literally for, the only thing I have problems with if it's got like mould or someone's dinner in it. And I have had comics where that and you just go, And sometimes you have to just, and it's just awful sometimes. But that just happens and you got here, also fanzines. I love collecting fanzines, but again, they're very hard to get. And he mentions here what happened to all his collection of fanzines. That's why they're so it's, but But it's just talking about all the various comics, and it's just a joy to, every page is a joy to read. So I really, and he talks here about, obviously he gets to Beano and Dandy. I've just recently bought a few old Beano and Dandies, and I just love them. I love all those sort of things, and it just talks always. And this is Alan Austin in 2015. First, it's just great. Just a joy to read. If you're a comic fan, I think really you will thoroughly enjoy this book. Alan Austin. I never met the guy. I might have bought some stuff of him. I can't recall, I must admit. But at the same time, and he's also got another book as well. You can find it on Amazon, of course. It does say it's at the back. Let's have a look. Oh, Adventures of Bernie Burroughs, bookseller. I expect that's quite fascinating as well. A joy to read as well. I would never want to be a bookseller. I can't imagine just running a bookshop. Just would suck out the joy of books for me, I must admit. I think it's bad enough selling things on eBay. I don't mind doing that, but it's just sometimes you think everyone else, because I know myself. And when I go down the market, I sort of, I'm not going to buy that. It's a bit dingy or a bit what's his name or something's wrong with it. It's 50p or a pound. I'm terrible. I shouldn't be like that, but however, printed by Amazon, of course, at the back. That's near enough inevitable nowadays. But however, totally recommended. My life as a comic collector and dealer, an absolute joy to read from start to finish.